This is the presentation of Overcoming Legacy Bias, Redesigning Gesture Interactions in Virtual Reality with the SAN Community in Namibia. Presented by Emilie Arendttorp from Aalborg University. Recent improvements in hand tracking technologies in virtual reality have made it possible to design controller-free, hand gesture-based interactions using VR systems such as the Oculus Quest 2 and the HoloLens 2. However, gesture-based applications are often designed by professional system developers without any input from end users. Authors have suggested involving users in the gestural language creation process. The majority of physiological behavior research into designing natural gesture interactions have been done with Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic participants, leaving out a large group in the design of natural gesture interactions here among the Global South. When developing new interactions with user groups already highly familiar with technology, there is a risk of designing with legacy bias. Legacy bias occurs when participants and informants transfer previous learned user interactions and experiences into the design and evaluation of new interactions. Gestures are used in everyday nonverbal communication through motion of body parts such as hands and fingers with an associated information. A gesture can be understood by itself or complementing verbal communication. Gestures are often used to emphasize or clarify statements, for example in intercultural conversations. Previously, Billinghurst and Buxton have defined 4 gesture types, followed by Eichner with a more refined distinction of 5 gesture types, of pointing, semaphoric, pantomimic, iconic, and manipulation gestures. We postulate that the inclusion of diverse user groups, especially the ones with little prior exposure to technologies, can diminish legacy bias if included in early stages of design and testing of gestures. One such group is the small SAN community of Dongabos. Dongabos is remotely situated in the central eastern part of Namibia, in the middle of the Kalahari Desert, only reachable by foot, donkey, horse, or a 4x4 car. The community lives on a farmland on which they have built their own houses with available materials, such as metal sheets, only with a few households having solar panels for electricity. There is limited access to water via the community borehole, which works through a solar panel in the day. The settlement consists of more than 30 households, usually comprising with a couple with 3 to 7 children. Primary learners attend a government school approximately 5 kilometers from the settlement. Due to their limited interaction with digital technology, they do not have the same legacy bias as Western people. The Dongabos community was currently planning the construction of a campsite for tourists, yet they could not visualize it, so we decided to base our study on creating a VR campsite planning application using gestures. Our study consisted of 4 phases. First, an exploratory study was conducted in the field consisting of 1 gesture session and 1 technology VR exploration session. The first gesture session functioned as a method to observe if the gesture types of Eichner were valid in Dongabos. The gesture session was partner-based, following the suggestion of Morris et al., using charades for the inspiration of the gesture sessions. One participant was showing gestures, where the other participant responded to the gestures. The gesture session consisted of 3 different assignments: drawing, direction, and charades. A total of 119 gestures were recorded during the 3 assignments of drawing, direction, and charades. The gestures found through this session was used for inspiration for gestures to be implemented in a prototype for the VR headset Oculus Quest 2. The prototype included 8 objects for the participants to create and move around using buttons. 8 buttons for objects and 5 for movement. 3 static gestures got implemented based on the first gesture session. The static gestures were stop, pointing, and thumbs up. The developed prototype was brought to the field for redesign based on another gesture session, a VR session, and a co-design session meant to resolve ambiguous and open questions in regard to gesture interpretation. 6 groups participated in the co-design session. All groups were active in sharing ideas in regards to the application, its content, and interaction techniques. It was surprising to see how creative they were in combining buttons to solve tasks that others chose to solve with gestures. This speaks to the openness of the session in enabling the participants with very little VR experience to create and redesign VR as a technology. We recognize that natural gestures used in human-human communication are not necessarily directly transferable to interactions in VR. Upon further discussion with the community, it was agreed that the thumbs up does not serve its purpose in the VR and should only be used as a concluding gesture to close the program. On the other hand, the stop gesture was immediately adopted in VR interactions. We conclude that natural gestures suggested by users need to be implemented and evaluated to assess their usefulness in VR. Throughout this study, it has become clear that creating a universal gesture library is neither possible nor desirable. While user-centered gestures need to be validated against technical constraints, we also imply that further research into, for example, gender-sensitive gestures should be carried out. Thus, designing for the pluriverse suggests the implementation of multiple gestures for the same interaction. Ideally, a combination of methodological steps and engagement of diverse user groups should be targeted to reduce biases. At a time where digital technologies encroach and determine transformation in social interactions, such as the metaverse and AI, it is more important than ever to recognize the possible but also necessary contributions from researchers and users currently situated at the margins of HCI. This study directly advances the HCI agenda for diversity through empirical work as a part of an ongoing research and design partnership with an indigenous community in Southern Africa, thereby challenging systemic bias and promoting the design for the pluriverse.